And this completely inaccurate story was dreamt up that he was born somewhere else. And that is actually how Trump launched his political campaigning originally. I mean, that is his power base. It is amongst people who deny the facts of history in order to create a different sense of the present. And this continues to this day. And you've seen what's happened in the United States with the refighting of the arguments around the Civil War and slavery in America. And that's why I think we always have to be conscious that history and the interpretation of history and dealing with alternative facts, as they're called, have to be dealt with. And, you know, we still have people around who deny the Holocaust. Not many, fortunately, and it's not a big issue in Britain, but there are people who do. So understanding history, reminding ourselves of it, getting it right, and particularly where it deals with racial stereotypes, is absolutely fundamental to having a healthy and diverse society. And just to give a few historical points, I think one of the things which has emerged since I was at school is a completely different interpretation of history as seen through the eyes of black people who've done historical research. I hadn't realised until very recently that there's a fair amount of hard evidence to suggest that there was a whole string of Roman emperors, starting with Severus and then Caracalla, who were black. You know, they came from Africa. I don't think the Romans had a sense of race in the sense that white people have had in the last 2 or 3 centuries. They didn't think about the world in that way, but they were African. It wasn't an issue for them, but of course the picture we've always been taught in our schools here about the Roman Empire was that it was basically present-day Italians living in Rome running the world, but actually they're barbarians, essentially, were white people with long hair who lived in the forests of Germany and Scotland. It's a different way of looking at the world, but it got distorted throughout history. And if you go through our own Middle Ages, you know, when the Renaissance was beginning, the real start of it, of course, was in Spain. I mean, those of you who go to Spanish holidays, have been to Cordoba, will have seen that actually it came out of Africa. The Moorish invasions, which really brought civilization to Europe, and came out of great empires in Mali, around Timbuktu and elsewhere. And this is an aspect of history we completely lost. And if you read carefully into British Tudor history, which is always seen as a Britain in its white sense, that actually there were an awful lot of black people around in Tudor Britain. Of course, Shakespeare wrote about race and about anti-Semitism, but it was a common phenomenon. Of course, most of those people have been absorbed through intermarriage into the host population, but it was a feature of British political life. And similarly, the way that we were traditionally taught about slavery, we're now beginning to understand in a different way. I mean, the way I was taught as somebody who was brought up actually as a Quaker in York was that, you know, slavery was abolished as a result of enlightened, liberal-minded people like Wilberforce, which of course it was. But actually the man who really drove it was a free slave called Equiano. He had an extraordinarily diverse life and came here and he worked with the abolitionists and was the key organizer. But that perspective has often been completely lost. And I think in modern times we've only just learned to recognise that in the First and Second World War, for example, an enormous numbers of people came to fight here from Africa, from the Caribbean, particularly from the Indian subcontinent. Many died, many suffered atrocious injuries, and that's all been somehow written out of our British history, and it needs to be revived. And it's not just here, I mean, it's happened in France. You know, France experienced at the time of the Napoleonic Wars massive slave uprising in Haiti, Toussaint Louverture, but that whole history was suppressed, and France saw the world in a fundamentally different way. So I think, you know, as a politician, I want to make sure that we do think about history in the right way, and we look at evidence. We don't allow ourselves to be distorted by alternative facts. And in that way, we learn to respect diversity in a proper way. But let me just try and bring my remarks to a conclusion. I want to work with all the communities in London and the UK. As I said at the beginning, I want our party to be genuinely diverse in Parliament, in local councils. I hope that people here will get politically active on our behalf. We desperately need it in many parts of London. We've got facing